Hey guys. Sometimes I feel like I'm living in a different reality than other people. Like everything that happens is so predictable, so obvious, so foreseeable, and the reactions even more so. But if you're watching this video, I'm sure you feel the same way. This shooting is so unsurprising. We'll see more like it as angry young men like Brenton Tarrant, who feel cheated out of their birthright and have no hope for the future, take drastic, horrible measures, not for infamy, but for the reverberation that the inevitable reaction to this event and events like it will surely achieve. Tarrant was not a conservative, he was not a liberal. He was a disaffected young man who, more than any other ideology outside of ethno-nationalism, was a collapsitarian, an accelerationist. I do think it's important that you read his manifesto, although I can't link it because this video will get a strike, because we should understand the motivations of mass murderers. If you do read it, you'll see that he resented liberals and conservatives alike, anyone who contributed to the cultural demise that the West is experiencing. He talks about conservatives' impotence and complete inability, even unwillingness, to conserve anything at all. And he despised what globalists have done to the West. Here's what he had to say about his political identity. Are you right wing? Depending on the definition, sure. Are you left wing? Depending on the definition, sure. Are you a socialist? Depending on the definition. Worker ownership of the means of production, it depends on who those workers are, their intents, who currently owns the means of production, their intents, and who currently owns the state and its intents. Are you a conservative? No, conservatism is corporatism in disguise. I want no part of it. I want to talk about this from an intellectual, unemotional standpoint because I think we can all agree we want to prevent future violence, and the reactions are completing the circle of events initiated by the shooter, just as he intended. It reminded me of the movie Seven. Kevin Spacey's character knows he'll be killed in the end, but that the sequence of events that he sets in motion ultimately achieves his greater plan. In order for it to be executed in its totality, all other actors must behave as anticipated. And in that way, they're being used to do the architect's bidding. Much is the same with this shooting. Brenton Tarrant needed the media, the government, and the people to react predictably, emotionally, in order to hasten a cultural collapse through the disintegration of social cohesion. And that's exactly what is happening. In the manifesto, he outlines how he became increasingly tormented by existential angst while witnessing the West's cultural demise. And instead of slowly watching it die, he wanted to hasten the collapse. He wanted the ensuing chaos to engulf us and for the ramifications of the shooting to accelerate the downfall. He said, "Won't your attack result in calls for the removal of gun rights from whites in the United States? Yes, that is the plan all along. You said you would fight to protect your rights in the Constitution. Well, soon will come the time." In a section in his manifesto about his motivations, he says that he committed the murders to incite violence, retaliation, and further divide between the European people and the invaders currently occupying European soil. To agitate the political enemies of my people into action, to overextend their own hand and experience the eventual backlash. To create an atmosphere of fear and change in which drastic, powerful, and revolutionary action can occur. To add momentum to the pendulum swings of history, further destabilizing and polarizing Western society in order to eventually destroy the current nihilistic, hedonistic, individualistic insanity that has taken control of Western thought. Finally, to create conflict between the two ideologies within the United States on the ownership of firearms in order to further the social, cultural, political, and racial divide within the United States. This conflict over the Second Amendment and the attempted removal of firearms rights will ultimately result in a civil war that will eventually balkanize the U.S. along political, cultural, and most importantly, racial lines. There was a reason that he mentioned PewDiePie at the beginning of the shooting. It's not because he was inspired by him. Anyone that watches PewDiePie knows he has never condoned violence, and he is a lighthearted, good-natured guy. Tarrant mentioned PewDiePie because he witnessed the treatment of alternative media figures and how they're demonized by the media by associating them with horrific actions through this vague process of alt-right radicalization, which is patently absurd, especially as it pertains to PewDiePie. Tarrant knew that if he mentioned him, the media would slander PewDiePie, blame him for this terrible slaughter, and say that it was his radicalization, his actions, that led the shooter to do something like this. Then there would be massive public and media pressure to shut down PewDiePie. And just look at the reactions. These media stooges and blue check leftists are doing exactly what the shooter wanted. Now, with more subscribers than any other channel, I think it's like 90 million, PewDiePie is in serious danger of getting shut down. In the event that he is, Tarrant's plans will be fully realized. This cultural fissure will finally sever, and there will be a tremendous backlash. It was a strategic element of the shooting. Get the media to blame YouTubers for this, put pressure on tech giants to further silence them, and ultimately for Westerners to take up arms when their free speech rights are truly suppressed. The shooter thought that this was an elegant plan, and the media, despite him saying outright in clear written language that this is what he wanted, is helping him by being totally predictable, particularly in the event that they pressure tech giants to crack down on right-leaning commentators. And they will. We're fools if we think that YouTube and Google are going to let us continue to speak on these platforms. Just today, my video series on the Holodomor was age restricted. There's also a reason that he mentioned Candace Owens in his manifesto. He said, "Is there a particular person that radicalized you the most?" Yes, the person that has influenced me above all was Candace Owens. Each time she spoke, I was stunned by her insights, and her own views helped push me further and further into the belief of violence over meekness. Though I will have to disavow some of her beliefs, the extreme actions she calls for are too much, even for my tastes. It seems incredibly obvious to me that this is a troll, but the media doesn't understand internet culture, nuance, or sarcasm for that matter. So he knew that she would be eviscerated for this, despite quite obviously being blameless. Anyone that's seen Candace's commentary knows that she is center-right, she's not an extremist. His statement here is dripping with sarcasm, and he did this for a very specific reason. He mentions Dylan Roof in a positive light, so I think it's safe to say that he wanted to neutralize her political power by creating an association with this mass murder. He was punishing her for mobilizing Black conservatives, since he has disdain for both conservatives and Black people. He also knew that if she were banned, this would inflame racial and political tensions. There is serious danger in the media, the public, and the alternative media playing into his hands here. I saw this tweet by Jordan Peterson, and it filled me with rage. The pathology of identity politics on the extreme right. This is what the shooter wanted. He wanted to deepen the cultural divide on the lines of identity. And despite all of Peterson's nauseating platitudes denouncing identity politics, he has enthusiastically become a pawn in a murderous plot to inflame racial, religious, and political animus between groups. It's sort of profound in its irony. Despite a document denouncing conservatives, denouncing leftists, denouncing really any group while only identifying with eco-fascism, the People's Republic of China, ethno-nationalism, and socialism, Peterson still fans the flames of this group divide by identifying him as a right-wing extremist. I'm making this video because I want to prevent these acts of violence in the future. And I know how to prevent them. But I also know that there's nothing I can do about this, and that none of the most powerful actors will be anything but predictable, who, like Peterson, will play a powerful role in Tarrant's plans by hastening the collapse. Tarrant wrote about accelerationism in very specific terms. True change and the change we need to enact only arises in the great crucible of crisis. A gradual change is never going to achieve victory. These tumultuous times can be brought about through action. For example, actions such as voting for political candidates that radically change or challenge entrenched systems, radicalizing public discourse by both supporting, attacking, vilifying, radicalizing, and exaggerating all societal conflicts, and attacking or even assassinating weak or less radical leaders and influencers on either side of social conflicts. A vote for a radical candidate that opposes your values and incites agitation or anxiety in your own people works far more in your favor than a vote for a milquetoast political candidate that has no ability or wish to enact radical change. Canvass public areas in support of radical positions, even if they are not your own. Incite conflict, place posters near public parks calling for Sharia law, then in the next week, place posters over such posters calling for the expulsion of all immigrants. Repeat in every area of public life until the crisis arises. Destabilize, then take control. If we want to radically and fundamentally change society, then we need to radicalize society as much as possible. This attitude is prevalent in politics and in the general population these days. These are not just the insane musings of a mass murderer. Look at the Justice Democrats, for example, and I've linked Mr. Reagan's excellent video on AOC and others like her that are essentially actors being used to fill governmental roles in order to evangelize radical positions. AOC is not a natural phenomenon. She's a carefully cultivated method of political and cultural demolition. We have forces on both sides seeking to destroy through the creation of an imbalance, through subversion, through radicalization, through polarization, using the media and those stupid enough to be influenced by the paradigm. In that way, both extremities are trying to bring a societal collapse, then capture power and rebuild the world in their image amidst the ensuing state of chaos and anarchy. So how do we prevent violence like this from happening again? We stop reacting emotionally and we look honestly at the real causes. Yes, of course, the blame always falls on the individuals that perpetrate crimes like these. But once this becomes a pattern, just like Islamic terrorist attacks have become a pattern, and attacks like this will as well, we have to look beyond the individual if we are seeking to avert recurrences. First, the shooter was correct that despite New Zealand gun laws being among the strictest in the world, guns would be blamed for this, and it would affect culture and legislation surrounding gun use. We can't keep acting like guns are the cause. There's no gun law or combination of laws that will prevent attacks of this nature. Once we give up this right, we'll be vulnerable to Islamic terrorist attacks, crime from our own people, and an ever-encroaching evil federal government that would strip us of basic rights if an armed populace was no longer a deterrent. We also have to look at our immigration policies. There's no multicultural solution. We've tried. It's failed. There's no end game here where all disparate cultures are existing together peacefully. It's never going to happen. And until we realize this, we'll continue to foster hostile climates that create disaffected groups of increasingly violent people. We have to evaluate our economic future, how we've diminished the prospect for future generations to have children and relationships. Things like this, personal satisfaction, a feeling of safety in one's community, trust in their government. These are actually preventive measures. These things create lives for people, reasons to keep living. They create accountability. We have to look at how we've treated men, how we've demonized their masculinity, taken their hope, and created a generation of fighting-age men plagued with nihilism and without the normal support systems that would give someone like this a reason to just live a normal life. Fighting nihilism. That's the answer. How do we do that? We have to create a culture that's worth fighting for because the West right now is not. It has degenerated into a society where the most vulnerable among us are preyed upon and indoctrinated, where incentive structures to destroy families are glorified, where the government is the mother, the father, the friend, the God. We begin to create beautiful things again. I got a lot of shit in my last video for saying that pursuing a career in art or music is unwise, and I stand by this. It's a calculated financial risk that other people are not responsible for subsidizing. But that isn't to say that no one should pursue the arts at all. Artistic endeavors and fostering an environment rich in art, literature, music is essential for Westerners to nurture their souls. It is and always has been a vital part of our spiritual health and psyche. This is a very sad turn of events, and my heart goes out to these victims and families. But unfortunately, unless massive strides are taken to correct course, we will see this again and again as our culture's gangrenous affliction worsens. Then we'll see Islamic retaliation. It will be a worsening tit for tat until it erupts into a war that involves all of us. If you cannot see how this is clearly going to play out, you're a fool. Or worse, like the media, a pawn. Thanks, folks, and I'll see you soon. Bye.